I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know for Lightning Storm in Season 3. This is an endgame build, so if you want to see the leveling build, that was my previous video. But regardless, this video can help you prepare even if you're just leveling. Keep in mind I haven't been able to play Season 3 yet, so I'm just using all of the knowledge that I have in order to make the best build possible for you guys to start the season with. But I'll be sure to mention things that I'm still questioning and give you alternatives just in case. So I'm going to go through the skills and explain what they do, as well as the order you probably want to use them in. So typically when you're going into combat, you're going to want to pop your Hurricane, which is going to not only reduce enemies' damage by 20%, but it's also going to deal damage, apply poison to enemies that are near you, and it's going to increase your skills by +2 because we're using Storm Shifter's aspect on our boots. You'll probably also want to have Cataclysm active when you're in combat, so pop Cataclysm before you go into the fight. It's good to keep this on all the time because this is applying vulnerable to enemies as well as doing additional damage. Keep in mind that Cataclysm will actually be stronger if we use our Earth Spike first. That's because of our Resonance passive as well as our QUICKSHIFT passive. The same goes for Lightning Storm. So next up, we're probably going to be using Earth Spike and then Lightning Storm, and we'll channel Lightning Storm until the enemies die. Now, if any enemies get close to you, you're going to want to pop your Debilitating Roar. This should end up having no cooldown because we use Hunter's Zenith, which means anytime we're getting kills with our werewolf skills, which is all of our storm skills, because we're using Tempest Roar, we'll remove the cooldown from the next bear skill we use. This is also going to be a big source of Fortify for us. The same applies for Trample. It's not going to have any cooldowns as long as you got a kill with our storm skills beforehand. This is going to be a great source of Spirit, as well as our way of breaking CC. If at any point you feel yourself not needing the extra Spirit from Trample, feel free to change this to Fortify and keep your Fortify up even easier. But if you ever find yourself wanting to use Defensive Pants, then you'll definitely want to have this for the extra Spirit in case you drop Tybalt's Will. Now let me show you what a basic skill rotation looks like, and don't worry about the Spirit too much because I don't have the correct build on right now, so my Spirit's going to go away real quick. Now, in a real situation, you're probably going to want to stay as far away as possible from the enemies, but if you find yourself too close to enemies, you can always pop your Debilitating Roar for that 70% damage reduction, or dash away with your Trample. Now this build does intend you to use your Earth Spike before you channel so you can activate the extra damage, but sometimes it can be practical to spam your Lightning Storm instead to get your damage out a little bit faster. For our Spirit Boons, I actually for the first time am considering not using Wariness. I like the idea of Gift of the Stag. After they buffed it, there's actually quite a bit of maximum spirit, and since we're using Earth and Might, we have a chance to fill our spirit completely with a lucky hit chance. That means the more spirit we have to fill, the better that becomes. But this is going to be for you to decide based off your spirit needs. In fact, in the written guide, I think I'm going to take off Gift of the Stag and put Wariness just so that people know that this is the priority in a dangerous situation. But keep in mind that you can always use Gift of the Stag if you need it. Next up for our Spirit Boons, we've got Iron Feather and Avian Wrath. If you don't need the survivability from Iron Feather, or you need the extra spirit, you can always go Energize. Additionally, if you don't need the spirit or the survivability, you can always go Overload. And finally, if you don't need the survivability, but you do need the Fortify, you could always go Bolster. If you do need the survivability, but you still need Bolster, you could always move Calamity over as well. There's actually quite a few good choices in this build, so don't be afraid to tailor it to your needs. Now, if you haven't leveled up yet, or you haven't gotten the unique items you need, make sure you look at my leveling guide video because it's going to have a lot of the aspects that you might put in place of these things. But keep in mind that Tempest Roar is a vital part of this build, and you're going to be dealing with long cooldowns if you're not running Hunter's Zenith. But for a helm, we're going to be using Tempest Roar. For chest armor, we're going to be using either Vigorous, Disobedience, or Juggernaut. I haven't figured out what the numbers on Juggernaut mean yet, so I don't know if I can recommend that one. But make sure you keep that in mind because if it is good, we don't really need to have our dashes on a shorter cooldown. So we can extend the cooldown and get that armor if it's really beneficial. I'm hoping that Juggernaut is a stable choice, whereas Disobedience is kind of not a great choice because it constantly fluctuates back and forth. But if you don't need the armor, then Vigorous is what you're going to run here. The maximum armor needed is 13,300 if I remember correctly for tier 100 Nightmare dungeons. So that's what you're going to be aiming to hit. Next up, we've got the Unsung Aesthetics Wraps. These are the new gloves that make this build so much more powerful in this season. And this synergizes really well with the fact that we're using Earth and Might. Next up, we've got Tybalt's Will. This one is an optional one. You can either go Defensive Pants or Tybalt's Will. You should be able to maintain your spirit regardless, but this is going to be a great way to get more spirit into the build. And it's also a 40% damage multiplier, so it's definitely worth it if you can survive with them. Next up is our Storm Shifters aspect. This is going to give us +2 to our shapeshifting skills, which is basically everything in our kit because we're using Tempest Roar. For a weapon, I decided to go with Retaliation. Now you have a choice here. I put Lightning Dancer on the amulet because Retaliation is going to scale our damage more for bossing, and I feel like the one thing this build can lack sometimes is boss damage. Whereas Lightning Dancer is really good for AoE. So if you want to up your AoE, you could put this on the weapon instead. But I kind of prefer the retaliation here because I really want that extra boss damage. On a ring, we're going with Mighty Storm's aspect. And our second ring, we're going with Hunter Zenith. Now Hunter Zenith is really good because it's giving us ranks to heighten senses and quick shift. And because we're utilizing that in this build, we're going to have a lot of points in each of those, and that's a lot of damage reduction and damage. This is also our way to reset our bear skills. So I really think it's a worthwhile choice. It does feel a little bit bad to give up the close damage and the distant damage from a normal ring, as well as whatever that aspect might be. So if you really want to go for a pure damage build, then that might be the way to go. And if you do that, you could always go intercom. But I think I'm going to stick with Hunter Zenith in most dangerous situations. For stats, if you're on the written guide, you can always just hover over the items to see the stats underneath. But you can also click on this little bar here. And it's going to show all the stats in more detail. We're not going to worry about the helmet because that's Tempest Roar. But in case you don't have it yet, here's the recommended stats. And then for our chest piece, we're going with total armor, damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, damage reduction from distant enemies, and any other damage reduction stat. This last one could also be maximum health or some type of applicable damage. But typically try and go for these. Again, on the gloves, it's a unique, so we don't have to worry about the stats, but they're here if you need them. Same thing for Tybalt's Will. And then for the boots, we're going with the total armor while in Werewolf, spirit cost reduction, all stats, and movement speed. I believe this all stats is required for the build, so make sure you grab it. But it's possible that if you get on the weapon, you may not need it. On the weapon, we're going with damage to close enemies, damage to distant enemies, willpower, and all stats. For the amulet, we're going with Envenom, spirit cost reduction, damage reduction for poisoned enemies, and total armor while in werewolf form. There's not much I would really change here, but amulets are kind of hard to get the right stats on, so just focus on getting the Envenom and spirit cost reduction, and hopefully the other two stats are usable. And then for our ring, we're going with critical strike chance, damage to close enemies, damage to distant enemies, and lucky hit chance. Lucky hit chance here could probably be maximum life or lightning critical damage. You probably want to go for the lucky hit chance just because it's really hard to get lucky hits with the lightning storm already. So any lucky hit chance we can stack is going to be helpful. For our gems, we're going with emerald on the weapon, ruby on the armor, and diamonds on the jewelry. For your resistances, you're going to have to pay attention. If you happen to get some random resistance on your boots, for example, then you might be able to adjust your points to be able to use the individual gems for the different resistances on your accessories. And then you might free up a way that you can have skulls in one of your accessories instead. But the only resistance we're getting is poison from this build, so it may not be the case. For our Seneschal construct, we're going to go with Tempest and Flash of Adrenaline. For Tempest, we're going with Devastation support, Swift support, and Efficiency support. My main idea here with Tempest is to try and help with single target damage that we might be lacking. I haven't gotten to see the numbers on them and how they scale, so we'll have to see if Tempest is the best one for that, but I think it should be, at least for a ranged attack. Then for Flash of Adrenaline, we're going with Duration support, Safeguard support, and Tactical support. These are all about extending the duration of this and also shortening the cooldown. We're also going to get the damage reduction from the Safeguard, so this is giving damage and damage reduction. Now I'll get into it when I get to the Paragon boards a little bit, but basically I have an alternate Paragon board in case you end up running into spirit issues. I went with the higher damage option as the one that I put in the actual build, but if you want it, it's here in the written guide. For a skill tree, we're going to be putting 2 points in Earth Spike. You could go Fierce Earth Spike by taking a point out somewhere else, and this might be a way to help you keep your Fortify up if you find that you're running into issues keeping it up. But I've never had issues keeping it up. Next up, we're moving down to the core tree, where we're going to grab Lightning Storm and Primal Lightning Storm. Make sure you max out Lightning Storm, and we're also going to grab a couple of points in Wild Impulses here. If you want to pull a point out for the Enhanced Earth Spike, I'd say just pull it from here, because this is increasing our spirit cost and increasing our damage, so I value this less than other damage spots. Moving down, we're going to grab 2 points in Debilitating Roar, and then we're going to grab Maxed Out Ancestral Fortitude. If you find you don't need the resistance for whatever reason, you can always pull it out of here. Then we're going to grab 3 points in Nature's Reach, and then move down to our Wrath tree, where we're going to get 1 point in Hurricane up to Savage Hurricane. We're going to max out Endless Tempest, Bad Omen, and Electric Shock, as well as in Venom. We're going to get 1 point in Trample, going to Savage Trample. Don't forget the 1 point in Toxic Claws. We're also going to be grabbing 3 points in Resonance and 3 in Defiance. We're going to grab Cataclysm and a Supreme Cataclysm, and then we'll max out Quick Shift and Heightened Senses. Finally, for our Keystone passive, we're going with Earth and Might. Now, I base this decision off of the fact that the new gloves have 20% lucky hit chance, and I'm hoping that makes it to where this is good enough. But if you find that you're not triggering this consistently enough, feel free to go for Ursine Strength for the damage, or Perfect Storm if you're a little lower on Spirit. This is something I'm just going to have to test in Season 3, and I'll give you guys an updated build in about a week or so. For our Paragon boards, we're going to be starting with Electrocution. We're going to get all of the nodes for Electrocution, as well as all of the rare nodes on the starter board. We're going to move up and we're going to grab the Heightened Malice board, where we're going to get the Territorial Glyph, and we're going to get every point available for Territorial, as well as the rare nodes here. And we're going to get Overturn, Toxic Bane, and poison resilience up on our way to the actual heightened malice legendary node. Moving to the right, we're going to be putting on the ancestral guidance board, and here we're going to grab the legendary node, as well as reclamation, natural attunement, spiritual power, and the 2 rare nodes here on the glyph, and we're going to put fulminate here. Moving to the right again, we're going to be putting thunderstruck on the board. We're getting both the rare nodes in the glyph area, as well as earth and sky here. If you end up needing more stats to hit your bonuses, make sure that you put points into the intelligence or the dex here, because that's going to be higher due to earth and sky. And you can get those points by pulling out of the blue critical strike damage nodes on the way over to our legendary node. Finally, moving down, we're going to grab constricting tendrils, and here we're going to put the spirit glyph. We're going to get all of the dex nodes here, and that's going to be it for the Paragon boards. But I do want to mention the different way of setting this up. So if you delete constricting tendrils completely, you can add less for carnage here, and the legendary node in less for carnage is going to give you 2 spirit for every crit that you get. You'll only do that if you run into spirit issues, but you probably shouldn't have those issues as long as you're doing the build correctly. But if you do need to do that, you're going to end up having to move your glyphs around a little bit. So our spirit glyph here is going to have to be moved to the starter board. The starter board's electrocution glyph will have to be moved over to the new board, the less for carnage. And you'll just want to hit as many of the stats that are required for those glyphs as you can without going out of your way. I hope you guys like the build. I'm going to have to get my hands on it and tweak it throughout the season, but I definitely think this is a really solid start. I'll be sure to update the written guide as I find changes that are worth doing, and I'll give you guys an updated video in the next week or so. If there are any other builds you're looking forward to this season, make sure you comment below and let me know. But with that, I've got work to do on the Stormclaw video. I'll catch you guys later. Daddy Druid out.